Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for finding us in this new room. We try to confuse you as much as possible. So tonight we have Jill Talbot reading for us. And Jill, of course, is teaching now at UNT this year. And she's teaching nonfiction. And some of you are probably her students now. Many of you have the opportunity to be her student next semester. So if you haven't signed up for your nonfiction class for the spring, you should do so now. But not now. I mean, you should wait because, of course, you're turning off your cell phones. You should turn on your cell phone after the reading and then sign up. But not yet. Jill has a brand new book that just came out this semester. Just when she arrived, it came with her, and it's for sale out front. So you should pick up copies if you don't have copies after the reading. She's going to come up and sign books for you. So make sure you get a copy of that book. This is our last reading this semester. We're going to have more readings next semester. Stay tuned for announcements about those as we get closer. We're probably going to have a lot of visitors next semester, so lots of opportunities for you to earn extra credit, which is, I know, why you're all here, so thank you for that. We have to keep the extra credit industry alive somehow. So, well, now I'd like to bring up Clint Peters, who is a nonfiction PhD student in our program, and he's going to do the official introduction. So, Clint, come on up.
Good evening. Lubbock, Texas is where I am from, and is most often relegated hither to the seams of pages of literature. It is not even an afterthought, but a between thought, uttered within the unconscious breath that a speaker like me takes when reading out loud. It is located within a so-called flyover state, the Lone Star, as are cities of Utah, Idaho, Illinois, Colorado, and of course dozens of others. Perhaps, though, it is no joke that because Manhattan ensconces most of the literary establishment, then that an incestuous relationship results from all the writers writing from and within the same island. Evolutionary speaking, animals, when left alone, separate from continents and other creatures, develop what's called ecological naivete, as well as inbreeding. These animals don't know the rest of the world and what it is capable of because they haven't been there. I first encountered Jill Talbot when she submitted an essay for a journal I used to work for called Defunct, a repository for all things antiquated. She wrote a killer essay about payphones, about one phone in particular on a road trip to Lubbock where she lived, that she used to call an estranged partner that she couldn't let go. Describing her anxiety, her fingers wrapped around the dated silver cord, Jill made me feel riveted by the propulsion of her sentences and the metaphors they contained. Quote, "Once I saw the black handle of a payphone propped across the carrel, as if the call or decision, no one on hold. Maybe someone couldn't bring themselves to hang up." Reading that essay, I was struck by how Jill captured the starkness of the Texas plains, that impenetrable haziness that hangs over the windswept cotton fields that stretch until the eye loses sight of the earth. I was struck by her embodiment of a landscape most people merely pass through, fly over, on their way to over-imagined locations. Can I brag here and say that at the Defunct magazine editorial table, which was at a bar, I was one of Jill's most fervent supporters, that I got to send the great Jill Talbot an email that read yes. Absurd, as these things go, that a fledgling writer like me would have the voice that could sway the decision of an essayist so obviously in charge of her material. Since then, I've been aware of Jill Talbot's work where it has appeared in the Rumpus, Pank, the Paris Review Daily, Brevity, the Normal School, the Huffington Post, the Pinch, Diagram, and of course many other places. She's also lived in Colorado, in Lubbock, in Utah, in Idaho, in New Mexico, New York because perhaps it was necessary, Chicago, and now even in Denton, Texas. I've taught her essays in my creative writing classes. And when she came to the University of North Texas, she was kind enough to offer to come speak to my students instead of letting me blather on solo about her work, which she will also do right now. So please welcome Jill Talbot.
Thank you so much, Clint. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. I'm going to start tonight with a flash essay for my advanced creative nonfiction students, 4120 this semester. We've been focusing on the flash essay. For those of you not familiar with the flash essay or flash fiction, it's briefer, it's shorter, it's a mere mention. It's the feel when you're standing near the tracks and a train rushes by. This flash includes a quote from Michael Ondaatje's The English Patient, and Michael Ondaatje has been part of the UNT Visiting Writers Series, so I'm honored to be a part of it and to be reading work that has the intertextual use of one of his lines. What I want to do, instead of blurring our lines or taking credit for his mesmerizing prose, I'm going to set my hand here when I'm reading his lines. This is for my best friend Tracy. We've been best friends since junior high. We got into a lot of trouble together in junior high. We had wine coolers in my trunk, in my Cavalier Z24 in high school. We ended up going to grad school together and got even more in trouble there. We're fine now. She's actually an associate dean at a university with a political science PhD. So mess up all you want, have fun. The world's waiting for you. This is Stranded for Tracy. This night, like a photograph, neither one of us can make out when I call you 15 years later to ask if you remember the gun, the men, the comet. The two of us are on the side of Highway 82 outside of Brownsville, Texas, 40 miles from Lubbock. It's been a day-long drive, and my white Nissan is parked on the shoulder. No clouds, and the moon is waning. A flash holds steady in the northern sky, the Hale-Bopp comet. You are standing behind me, a gun in your hand. We're both wearing our long-sleeve flannel shirts, khaki shorts, flip-flops. The truck that pulled up behind us is dark, quiet, and we can't see the men who got out of it. The back right tire of my car is flat. Flat landscapes like this make it hard to hide, but standing out here in the dark, we understand how we might easily disappear. 2 states away, I read aloud as you drove us through the red dust of the Tucson mountains. A postcard. Neat handwriting fills the rectangle. Half my days, I cannot bear not to touch you. The rest of the time, I feel it doesn't matter if I ever see you again. It isn't the morality. It is how much you can bear. No date, no name attached. And then I stopped. The lines too close to the things we were doing back in Lubbock. You with that one man, me with that other. The two of us taking turns driving out of the state to change our state of mind. But every time we'd turn your Navy truck or my white car back toward Lubbock and give ourselves over to them, give ourselves away. But this night, the one right here, we're as still as the stars, trying to hear if the men are moving, if they're making a plan behind the slats of the truck bed to hurt us, or worse. Together we scratch down the postcard details of a close call, and I tell you what I remember most is the comet. Even now, I can see it solitary in the clearing, the lights of a passing mystery suspended, and the two of us, not knowing how long we would be stranded by the miles of choices that defied measure, or what we would, years later, be asked to bear. I'm going to read a selection from Loaded, my first collection of essays, and I'm actually going to read you tonight the first essay I wrote. It was from an assignment in a graduate workshop when we were to imitate Seneca's On Noise. The tradition of on blank is one that's strong in the essay. And while Seneca began so early, Hazlitt picked it up in the 18th century on the pleasure of hating. Didion picked it up in the 20th century on keeping a notebook, on self-reliance. And those are just a few examples. But it's one of the essays that I call the pure essay or the Montaignian essay. I should have mentioned Montaigne earlier. He was one of the first two. So the idea of the pure essayist, or where Montaigne, the father of the essay, began the essay, is with a writer just thinking on the page and trying to talk to, for Montaigne, he had just lost his best friend. And he missed talking to him. And he missed that intimacy they shared when they just talked about what they were thinking about. And that's one of, to me, the most beautiful things about the essay, is it's just sitting down and thinking through things. So this is on longing. If I ever meet a man who says, "You'll never want for anything," I'll pick up my purse, pay for my 2 glasses of Chardonnay, and call a taxi. For 2 hours now, I've been staring out the window of the cafe. It's that kind of day, gray, still cold, when I wonder if I shouldn't have just stayed in bed, or at least in my pajamas. But on days like this, I like to take books I've already read to a corner table in a cozy cafe, preferably in a bookstore, where people tend to show more respect for quiet. Today, it's Door Wide Open, a collection of letters between Jack Kerouac and Joyce Johnson, written in the 2 years following the publication of the infamous On the Road. It's a revealing exchange between a young woman never satisfied in love and a weary man crazed for the next moment. But I'm not reading. Instead, since the moment I sat down with my latte, I've been staring out the window. I know better than to sit next to a window, not because there's a draft or because I get too caught up in people watching, but because I have a tendency to long, to court my sense of dissatisfaction, and longing for me usually occurs next to windows. There's a Spanish film called Central Station, in which a woman in the final scene sits on the bus as it departs and thinks about leaving, about what she's going back to, where she's been, and where she'll never find herself. Throughout the film, she never articulates this until her final line: "I long for everything." I used to rent Central Station as a catalyst for falling down into my melancholy, but now I'm afraid of what reading that subtitle might do to me. As I get older, the things I long for are broader, harder, and not just a door knock or a credit card away. Most days, it's the kind of longing Joyce Johnson talked about in one of her letters, the longings we can't yet articulate. She and Kerouac had that in common, except that Jack believed in the power of geography, and he should have paid attention to one of his own literary heroes, Ernest Hemingway, who wrote, "You can't get away from yourself by moving from one place to another. There's nothing to that." In my 20s, I lived a life promoting the opposite idea, driving to faraway places in hopes of escape. 2 trips punctuated every year for me: Boquillas, Mexico in October, and Bottomless Lakes, New Mexico in May. When the smell of fall first blew into Lubbock, Texas, I'd start imagining wood smoke, the drive through the Davis Mountains, the chasms of Big Bend. And as girls started showing up to bask in the sun at my apartment complex's pool, I felt myself moving west, dipping my toes into the cold waters of that New Mexico lake. One year I realized that the problems I carried with me every day in Texas had been transposed onto those foreign yet familiar landscapes, and when I returned home, I cogitated about the immediate reappearance of my problems, which caused me to ache once again for the freedom of unknown territory. I had a difficult time reconciling why I couldn't bring tequila and mud tacos back to my office in the English building. Why those 2 worlds were so far apart, and why I couldn't keep the idea of Mexico without being there. I stare at a line in Door Wide Open when Joyce urges Jack, "Stand still for a while and don't run. Things are worse when you run from them." I consider how I've been working at staying in my life, working to stop longing to learn the streets in a new city. I think of Kerouac, who fought the desire to go with a need for solitude, who tried to convince Joyce that she too should not harbor fantasies of a life outside herself in a country or a city far away. He wrote, "In fact, your salvation is within yourself, in your own essence of mind." I do believe that most of what constitutes our longings comes down to distance, though not the kind recorded in numbers on the side of the highway. For most of us, there's a dangerous trap of space between what we have and what we want. In My Father's Daughter, Frank Sinatra's death was described by his youngest daughter, Tina, as an escape. According to her, her father left her mother, Nancy, for Ava Gardner in 1949, a year after Tina was born. But Sinatra never fully removed himself from his family, and during all the songs and women and shows of his life, he carried 2 dimes in his pockets to call home every evening to talk with his children. Here was a man who crossed the distance, who dared to imagine he could live a different life, though later he realized that he wanted both, a family and the freedom to love other women. Tina wrote that once he left, he never felt safe or whole again. If you wonder whether this is true, all you need to do is sit down and listen to Sinatra sing. He was hurting every day of his life. Maybe that's why Kerouac liked him so much, alluded to him so much in his novels as he did, because Kerouac himself wanted to settle down. His mind was on the wife he couldn't live with, and interaction was the mistress he craved as he suffered to watch the days, weeks go by and nothing said. A line from his novel Big Sur tracing this particular struggle. Kerouac's salvation lurked in the corners of city streets, in the escapes from his mind to someone else's through the rifts of a stranger's ramblings or the all-night conversations between friends. But after a while, he'd hear the words of his friends as the babble of a river, and he'd want to go away, to be alone. Then when alone, he'd itch to get back to his friends. Fleeting peace or a fleeting connection? What binds us is invisible, he writes in On the Road. And what would silence him would prove to be even more illusory, as alcohol threw a fire under the feet of his demons. Through the years, I've struggled with the choice between isolation and connection, but most of all, my desire has always involved the idea of somewhere else, or wanting what is not there. Men, or desert landscapes, or a better job. I know I'm not unique in wanting more and missing what I used to have or what I've never known, but I do think I'm part of a group of people who refuse to ignore those longings. Some people have never run off in the middle of the night or made the phone call at whatever cost. To me, that kind of longing within stasis, is more threatening, though I can admit I've known that as well. And through those years, my drinking eclipsed any other longing I might have. I am intimately familiar with being overcome by the notion that all I longed for was my next glass of wine. Still, my thoughts return again and again to what I long for besides that drink, and like the woman in Central Station, I long for everything. At least she's on a bus when she says that. Joyce Johnson is sitting in a cabin with the ghost of a man she is still clearly in love with after all those years. I don't blame her. I understand her, especially when she writes, "The trips I didn't take have always haunted me." I remember when a friend's son was 3, she worked to alter his "I want" statements to "May I please have?" So if he blurted out, "I want hot chocolate," she responded, "How do we ask for things?" He made a face, sometimes jumping up and stomping on the floor in frustration. After all, it's difficult to discover obstacles to desire. Finally, when he mumbled, "May I please to have hot chocolate?" he was quickly rewarded with the desired cup overflowing with marshmallows. Their exchanges raised questions for me. How do we ask for things? Can it be as easy as syntax? I've always been convinced that our needs become more complex as we get older, but I can remember the force of that little boy's longing. for hot chocolate being as strong as my own for solitude, as essential to survival as an annual trip to Mexico. I suppose the distinction comes in how long we harbor that longing. I cannot recall my friend's son spending the afternoon staring out the window at the empty driveway, pondering the hot chocolate he didn't get on a Saturday morning, though I've caught myself many times staring off into the distance, thinking about the things I can't or don't have. Now I'm staring at the brake shop across the street, wondering if there's a man in there who's kneeling down to check brake pads and yearning for more. Yearn. A word that lingers as heavy and slow in the throat as it does in the chest. Okay, everybody say it, yearn. 1, 2, 3. Yearn. You feel it? It's a great word. Or maybe that man has no idea that there is more. I see longing in the eyes of most people. Like the crossing guard I pass on the way to school each day. Sometimes I want to pull over, motion her to climb in, and offer her a ride. As John Steinbeck puts it in his own travel narrative, Travels with Charlie, away from capital H here. I want to offer her some kind of Thelma and Louise insistence on not taking it anymore. Each day as I drive slowly past her, I wave. She knows. Window staring gets me nowhere. I know this, which is why I know better than to position myself here. And it's not that I really need to go anywhere, though for some, I think it's imperative. There are levels of unhappiness that become unacceptable when prolonged or ignored. For those people, if it means filling out a change of address form at the post office, here's my pen. For me, I already know that I will move to a different city, a different state, sooner rather than later, and my state of mind will pack its bags and put them in the U-Haul right next to my wobbling television stand. Okay, so maybe on this move, I'll finally lose that TV stand. But I don't want to lose my capacity for longing, for missing, for wondering what might be, for yearning for what has come, gone, or disappeared before I had a chance to save it. What I want is both far and near, or even out of range, and the distance between all of those could be 1 night, or 1 year, or never. For me, not knowing what's next keeps my possibilities open. The people walking by the window, staring at me, staring out, can't begin to imagine the things that I've longed for. Longer legs. A man to buy me a beer and never ask me what my name is. My little girl to always want to spend time with me. A glass of Chardonnay, a weekend getaway. Electrolysis on my eyebrows. A phone that rings when I'm ready. To run into Robert Redford in a restaurant. To wear only matching panty and bra sets. To always be looking forward to something. To stop replaying conversations in my head. To learn how to make lasagna. To read Don Quixote. To hop a train and see where I end up. To get back to Mexico in November. To take a nap and not worry about what time I need to wake up. To know where I'll be in 5 months, but never know what I might be doing in 20 minutes. To find that rock along the Poudre River and the one along the Rio Grande. For Sinatra to sing the next song on the radio, because nobody cares like Sinatra sings. Kerouac wrote that. So breaking things up with another flash piece. When I was living in northern New York, about 18 miles from the Canadian border, the first day of classes, I had a beginning creative nonfiction workshop, and I had given them a writing exercise in class. If you have me in class now, you know it's something I don't do. I now prefer to honor people's private writing spaces. But we were doing a writing exercise, and I went to sit in the back of the room, and I looked out the window, and there were trees covering the window, and I felt the closed-inness of the landscape, and I said to myself, you're not going to make it here. It didn't make sense to me. The landscape didn't make sense to me. I felt very alone and very, very removed from what I had known. I grew up in Texas, and then I spent all the other years before New York in the West. And the words that came to me about the West and the Southwest and Texas in particular was, I missed the jagged spaces. I missed the screaming of the landscape. And so I decided that I missed it enough, and I felt so far away from home that I needed to write it. I needed to go home, if only in my writing. So I started this series of flash essays about my dusty and self-destructive 20s in Texas. I just read you one of them, Stranded. This is another one called Distance. I mentioned that my advanced creative nonfiction class has been working with the flash essay. We've been working with a 750 word range for workshop. The flash essay can go anywhere up to 2,000. I'm explaining some things tonight because oftentimes creative nonfiction is like the bastard genre of a department, and one that people are afraid of because they think it's dull or boring, when in fact it's one of the most brave things you can do as a writer, is to put yourself on the page without the mask of character or the title of speaker and say, this is the I, this is me. And so I'm not trying to be pedantic. I'm just trying to say this is what we do. If you're not familiar, come on over. We'll be glad to have you. So this is Distance. And I should say, too, I like the challenge of working within about a 450 word range. I like the challenge of the compression, how much I can get into the flash. Let's see. Stranded. My students know how much I love the word count on the page. Thank you. 398 was Stranded. Distance is 412. This isn't going to be a long essay because it's about distance, and paragraphs won't hold absence for long. So you get in and you get going. Watch. I stood at the podium in black. I don't remember that, of course, but I know it's what I always wear. The darkest night, the distance, a sharp outline of contrast, me against me. I do remember the way he leaned against the back wall in a pose I'd seen at that bar on 19th, where he played every Thursday. I do remember the lines of his blue and white shirt, the crease in the front of his jeans, the pointed toe boots. It was all so West Texas. He raised his hand and asked why I write things the way they never were, never could have been. That question, it upended me. I kept my eyes on him for the rest of the question and answer. Sure, he'd be my next question. On a night not long after that one, I walked home from campus, wondering what to say the next morning to a group of students about a character who wants nothing more than to get going and stay gone. But when I saw him strumming through the window of that bar, I lingered for a line or two, watched as he propped a boot heel on a rung and slowed down a fast song. I wondered if he might slow me down. He was from down south, a town called Marathon, dust and tumbleweeds, rust and empty roads, storefront signs that whine in the grit of the wind. I could hear the chords in the distance, darlin'. I have to say darlin' here because we were in Texas. In the middle of the night, in the middle of my bed, I struggled against the sheets to imagine the scratch of his beard against my body. That question of his, it should have been a sign, but I went after him anyway, and it wasn't long before he picked up on whatever it was that chased me like a chaser, gulping and gutting. We're all being chased. But he could stand still and stand it. I was like those tumbleweeds in Marathon, tossing myself toward some rusty-edged road. I was sure it was at least 26 miles or more between the two of us. Maybe the miles were mine. In the end, he taped a letter to my door. Whether you stay here or go there is not going to make any difference. I don't remember what I did with the letter. I do remember leaving town the next day, chasing the distance, the space I couldn't see, the grit in the wind, and I can admit it now, I've always stayed gone. So So Marilyn asked me earlier if I was comfortable being known as the essayist who, I'll leave the blank blank. But what I am learning about my role in the essay community is I am known for this one essay, The Professor of Longing, which Clint Peters was kind enough to teach in his intermediate creative nonfiction class this semester, and his students were kind enough to ask me some really insightful questions about. And I've never read it out loud, probably because it is a borrowed form essay, which means this is an essay that's in a form that already exists. So I have 3 borrowed form essays in The Way We Weren't. One is in the form of a wine list, one is in the form of a syllabus, which we're all familiar with, and one is in the form of a court hearing transcript. One of the things that the borrowed form allows me to do, which I didn't quite articulate well earlier when Clint asked about it in the Q&A, is that the borrowed form allows me to put the public persona and the private persona side by side. So when you take a form like the syllabus, you have a form that is authored by what you assume to be a very capable, authoritative, knowledgeable, put-together person, your professor, right? But your professor is also a human being who has her own lives and her own struggles. And so one of the things that the borrowed form allows me to do is to set that authoritative stance, that facade, if you will, against the reality of what might be beneath it. So this is the syllabus essay, as it's been called, and it borrows heavily from the authors that I'm talking about, so there's a lot of intertextuality. I always get distracted when readers say quote, unquote, things like that. I'm reading, I think, I'm reading about works that many of you will be familiar with, and one of the reasons that I chose those works is that I wanted that for my readers, that even if they weren't privy to that particular time in my life and the texts I was teaching, that here were texts that we might all find a common bond with. Now, let me say, if I don't mention any text that you know, don't freak out, okay? We can't all read everything, and I think there's this real misinformation about school and graduate school that if you haven't read something that you're just lost in the dark. It's okay. But maybe if I mention a text that you feel connected to, you'll write it down and go find it. None of them are very long. So this is The Professor of Longing. See, we write the same things again and again. 243, The Professor of Longing, Dr. Jill Talbot. Contact talbot1@boisestate.edu, 426-7060. Office, Liberal Arts 102C, a room I share with a broken shelf and 3 people I never see. Office hours, before and after class, and once in a booth in the Hyde Park Bar and Grill. Course description. This course is about failed attempts. It's about me standing in an office 2 states and 2 months ago, handing over a letter declaring that I was leaving academia indefinitely. It's about being on the road, Utah, Idaho, Montana, climbing north before having to turn around, scramble south. It's about the trying months of summer and ending up in a circumstance not on any map. It's about Boise instead of Missoula, adjustments instead of adventure, impediments edging out impulse, bi-monthly paychecks that can't cover rent and daycare, and my last cigarette. It will be writing in a cramped corner on a plastic TV tray in a fold-out chair bought at a thrift store. By the end of the semester, the focus will be 2 a.m. phone calls and bad checks. For the final, look for a bookcase and a love seat in the living room with the front door left wide open, Indy's favorite polka-dotted vest forgotten on the love seat. Texts. We're not going to read anything beyond my own proclivities. We'll discuss stories, essays, and poems that remind me of my most recent misgivings, the words underlining my past. Our study will include recurring images, my own, of course, as well as the themes of my disposition. The text in this class is me. Attendance. It's strange to think I'm even here. Years from now, I will feel as if these months were nothing more than an interruption, a curve in the story's road. Disclaimer. While these aren't the texts I really used that semester, they most accurately reflect who I was during those weeks when I kept my eyes to the sidewalk. August 22nd, Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson, Selections. Whitman has many famous lines about celebrating himself and containing multitudes and taking to the open road, sounding his barbaric yawp, yet stylistically he used a device called cataloging, a long list. Write that down. It's important because we all catalog, make long lists of lovers, of things to pack, pros and cons, items at the drugstore. Some catalogs come with details like wine lists. Some come in a shorthand no one but us can read, and if enough time goes by, neither can we, as we pull a forgotten slip of paper from the bottom of a purse or a pocket and stare at a mystery. Dickinson used dashes in her lines, random capitalization, difficult to decipher punctuation. She wasn't consistent in her usage, and often her poems were in unfinished forms. But it's the dashes that draw me, so we'll focus on those. Sometimes they appear at the end of a line, others in the middle, interruptions. Still, other poems are words alone, no dashes at all. Emphasis? A writer's pen carrying over to the next word down the line. Never intended as part of the prosody at all, like a pause in a conversation misinterpreted as silence or disagreement when it's only a search for the right words. Or are they like bridges, crossing a question? We'll be seeing these elements throughout the semester, catalogs of loss, of what lies between or is left to the end, the choices too difficult to decipher. Let's start with an opening line of Dickinson's. You left me, sweet, two legacies. It's no surprise that I read Kenny into this line, the legacy of our years together that began with the Eagle River and a half moon. The other, the sweetest legacy, our daughter, who, I suppose, he never saw as part of his prosody. After all, he hasn't seen her since she was 6 months old. He hasn't expressed a desire to see her. He has never once tried to be a part of her life. That dash, his disappearance. And so to the Whitman-esque open road he went, afoot and light-hearted, while me, my lines are a bit further down. I carry my old, delicious burdens. I carry them with me where I go. I swear it is impossible for me to get rid of them. The delicious burdens I bear because no state, not this one or the last 3 I've lived in, can trace a line after Kenny and make him pay child support. He's the dash that keeps dashing, a catalog of unanswered letters. August 29th, Kate Chopin, The Story of an Hour. A storm of grief I know well, and that feeling of being locked in a room alone and looking out of it, fearing the feeling that's coming and not being able to beat it back. For years I wanted to be free, and yet I had loved him. Sometimes. Here is the conflict in, the balance of, maintaining individuality while sharing a life with someone. I'll tell you, I've always wanted to share a duplex with a man. Him on one side, me on the other. So we have our separate spaces together, but I will not divulge that sharing a life with someone is not a thing I've ever been able to sustain, that I have repeatedly chosen self-assertion over possession, that I can discuss love within the context of a work of literature, but maintaining it for me is an unsolved mystery. If you need to see me before class, check outside the double doors on the east side of the building. I'll be huddled near a trash can, smoking like a stranger outside a convenience store. September 5th, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, The Yellow Wallpaper. I am trapped inside my own yellow walls. The apartment I rented on Dewey Street, about a 10-minute drive from the university, is the middle unit in a 3-unit structure. It is undoubtedly the smallest, crammed between the other two. The landlord who'd met me at the property in late July on my drive back from Montana opened the door to a hideous sight. Yellow walls with accents of deep red, a clash so revolting I almost didn't step inside. Gilman's description resonates. The color is repellent, almost revolting, a smoldering, unclean yellow. But there were only 2 weeks before classes began, the other apartments I had seen not livable or in questionable neighborhoods, and I still had to drive back to Utah to pick up Indy. The apartment has a bathroom off of the kitchen, a proximity that bothers me, a stand-only shower, a tiny bedroom, one closet. This is the smallest place I have ever lived, including the years in graduate school. Indy and I share a bed, one we found in the storage shed out back, and we sit side by side on a love seat, which barely fits along the wall. The state tells me I make $30 over the limit to qualify for assistance. I think that's about what I spend on smokes a month. Gilman admitted to altering her experience in her story using embellishments and additions to carry out the ideal. The ideal, she felt, was to keep women from going crazy. Later this semester, while Indy sleeps, I will sit on the love seat in the middle of the night, cutting my arms with nail scissors, assuming this is what is happening to me. September 12th, Willa Cather, Paul's case. Paul is what is considered a fragmented character. He embodies two worlds but doesn't really live in either. My mother on voicemail asks, "Where are you living?" And I'm not really sure. I'm not even sure I'd call what I'm doing here living. Indy's daycare costs $400 a month. Every 2 weeks, I make just $200 over that. Then there's the rent, the groceries at Albertsons, the wine I can't stop buying at the state liquor store, not to mention the quarters for pool, where I teach Indy to play, while we share a hamburger at the Hyde Park Bar and Grill. I am a fragmented character. I stand before you confident, poised, engaged. I stand inside myself a wreck. September 19th, Sherwood Anderson, mother. Another window-watching woman. This is a story that uses where a character lives as a metaphor for how he lives. The hotel in which he had begun life so hopefully was now a mere ghost of what a hotel should be. I think of my apartment, how it stands for the way there's not enough room here, a suffocation. September 26th, John Steinbeck, The Wayward Bus. I love how the woman in this chapter tells her whiskey glass, "No, you just stay here and wait for me." Alice Chico stands inside the screen door of the lunchroom, watching the bus drive away before setting out the close sign and taking a day to herself. In these her hours of rare isolation, she waits on herself, downs a glass of whiskey, then beer, suddenly realizing that the way you drink changes the taste. At some point, she goes into her bedroom, attached to the diner, and grabs a mirror, sets it down in front of her, and serves herself. I did this last night after I put Indy to bed, sipped Chardonnay in front of the bathroom mirror, keeping myself company. Like Alice, I too have become frightened, worried that I will run out of time, of wine, of cities in which to start over. October 3rd, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Babylon Revisited. In the spring semesters, I teach this on or around Indy's birthday. In the fall semesters, I teach it in October, the month 5 years ago when I wrote to Kenny. Jack Kerouac wrote that everyone goes home in October. It's October, and the last leaves are falling from the tree outside our bedroom. Come home. Unlike Charlie Wales, he never came back for his little girl. At least Charlie Wales tried. I love Indy enough for two parents. This part, at least, I get right. October 10th, Ernest Hemingway, A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. This story is a memory of an afternoon outside our basement apartment in Fort Collins, me in the green chair, Kenny on the porch step, the two of us discussing the old man and the two waiters. During class, I draw the peak of a triangle on the board with a line across the very tip of it, the fractions 1/8 above, 7/8 below. When I shade in the depth below the surface, I think how the story of us exists so far down that I'm at a level where I can't even see what was there and what never was anymore. Ken and I used to smoke on the back porch or balcony of every apartment we shared. Here I smoke on the tiny step outside our apartment. Yesterday, Indy followed me outside and asked me to quit. I said yes. I'm one bad habit down from a pile that stacked like unwashed dishes in the sink. October 17th, John Cheever, The Swimmer. This story is about a man who drinks his way home only to find an empty house, all the doors locked. Here we discuss the way a character can look in at the windows, see that the place is empty, an inversion of all those other characters who look out, wish to leave. How can I explain that I'm not even near halfway home, and it's getting darker with every week here, the muddy waters of my life churning, and I'm about to drown? October 24th, Tennessee Williams, A Streetcar Named Desire. Class canceled. October 31st, Sherman Alexie, The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven. I read this last week while sitting at the Hyde Park Bar and Grill in the middle of the afternoon. Alexie writes about anger and imagination being the key to survival, and I can admit I don't get angry enough. So maybe I balance my survival with what I imagine. I underlined this. I knew there was plenty of places I wanted to be, but none where I was supposed to be. A recurring theme in literature, the search for a place where one belongs. But it's these questions I'd like to raise, to hear your thoughts. The two Alexie asks. How do you talk to the real person whose ghost has haunted you? How do you tell the difference between the two? Because I can't figure that part out. November 7th, Joan Didion, The White Album. Didion, similar to Anderson, discusses the house she lived in as being indicative of the times and her own state of mind. Things were fucked up. The world no longer made sense. The center would not hold. We tell ourselves stories in order to live. I've become very good at this. Essay due. Assignment. Discuss the significance of a character's house and his/her relationship to it by focusing on 3 of the works we have read and discussed. You are also required to discuss 2 texts, poems, essays, films, stories, novels, that do not appear on this syllabus. The check I wrote last week at the Hyde Park Bar and Grill bounced. I knew it would. November 14th, Raymond Carver, The Ashtray and Why Don't You Dance? A stanza from the poem The Ashtray. Then walks back to the table and sits down with a sigh. He drops the match in the ashtray. She reaches for his hand and he lets her. Take it. Why not? Where's the harm? Let her. His mind's made up. She covers his fingers with kisses. Tears fall onto his wrist. A line from the story. His side, her side. Class adjourned. November 21st, Amy Hempel, Memoir. An interesting story with only 1 sentence, enough to tell the story of a life. The 3 hours of class, not enough to explain what that means. I'm unraveling. Can you tell? November 28th, Pam Houston, Cowboys Are My Weakness. Discussion, the last 2 lines of the story. This is not my happy ending. This is not my story. While you discuss, I've got to go in the hallway to return a call from a friend who is called to respond to the frantic message I left on her voicemail at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to tell her I'm fine, that I'm discussing a story with an unnamed narrator. It won't be a lie. December 5th, Tim O'Brien, The Things They Carried. We will close our study by examining the effect of Whitman-esque cataloging in prose form and how Lieutenant Jimmy Cross carries the letters of a girl that he hopes loves him, even though the narrator shows us it isn't so. The young lieutenant reads her words again and again as if he can change their meaning. When her words distract him from the war, he burns them. Let me clarify. It doesn't matter. He'll read those letters for the rest of his life. Those misinterpreted letters, like the checks I keep writing, and for some reason I pretend it doesn't matter. My balance already overdrawn past anything I can catch up with in time for the check to clear. 2 years from now, I'll send $160 a month to pay down the damage I'm doing here. But for now, I'll keep writing false words and fake numbers on a small slip of paper, convincing everyone but myself they mean anything. We'll cut the last meeting short because my last night turned into an Alice Chicoy afternoon when I decided that there was no way I could stretch my severe salary across another semester. So I've been cataloging my choices for the next city and am in a bit of a panic. Final. Your final is a representation of what you have learned in this class that may not be measured by exam or essay. I'm bringing a stack of university parking tickets I have accrued over the course of this semester. The manifestation of the fines owed to me and the fines I own. I'm going to finish up with one final flash, 406 words. This began with a line from Ernest Hemingway's The Garden of Eden. When you start to live outside yourself, it's all dangerous. I love epigraphs. I love Kathleen Graver's love of epigraphs when she read her poetry. But one of the things I find as an essayist is I can use the epigraph and the line that inspires me as a flashlight to guide me through the essay, and then I can let it fall away. Although for me, as a writer, and even when I read it, it's still there. Again, line from him. When you start to live outside yourself, it's all dangerous. This is All or Nothing Self-Portrait at 27. It's all empty beer cans and skinny dipping, Bud Light and chlorine, a guitar player with a beard who won't let go as hard as you do. It's teasing the strings of your orange bikini while he tosses his trunks onto the stone. It's the ease of your body through dark water. The day he taped a letter to your door, when he played that same chord, asking you not to leave, to live inside yourself for a while. It's this night when he strums the water and says, I guess there's a little Jill Talbot in all of us. And you worry where that leaves you. It's distracting, watching out a kitchen window while the clock hands on the wall stretch into an L, sheets taut as a boxing canvas. Now it's 20 after, and the gravel in the drive is still, unscattered. It's a woman in a purple coat bobbing through the back gate to peer through the dusty window of your garage, and you weaving behind the curtain. It's an empty back bedroom where the phone throws its high-pitched rings like punches. It's all apologies, or the ones you should offer but never do. It's running red lights after midnight, drinking hours before the party, and tripping over a rock in the living room, this one a PhD student in geology. It's stumbling from the back steps to find him surveying her neck with his tongue. You get to your Jeep, parade empty streets, do that screaming, crying thing you do, and strike the dash with the flat of your hand, every red light a dare. It's all underlining words in used novels. It's crossing borders, a $2 boat ride across the Rio Grande and a dusty truck, a street with a corner canteen with bars on the windows, but no doors. It's straddling a swayback horse out to the edge of town to talk with a woman who left Texas when her husband died. It's sharing an ashtray and stubbing out the afternoon, one sad story at a time. It's standing on a rock overlooking the river and seeing your life from a different country while the sun drops its orange curtain, a desert inside you. It's all thunderstorms in the distance, blinking lights on the answering machine, a payphone on the corner. It's running away from yourself knowing it's something you can never really do. 82 West, out of Lubbock. Thank you very much. I'll be more than happy to take just a couple of questions if anybody has one or missed the Q&A. Yes?
What's your revision process like if you have one?
I no longer have the privilege of workshops, so I make my own. I have 3 friends that I email drafts to, and they send them back to me. I have one writer friend who does not get my work nor admire it much at all. I trust him the most because he makes me prove and argue for what I'm doing and my choices. There's one who completely gets my tone and the grit that I love in my work. But he makes me question the things. He makes me question different things. And then there's a writer who's kind of between them. I get all of their feedback back. I also respond to their drafts as well. So we're always draft for draft. I get them back, I think about them, I stay away from the draft, something I often tell my students to do after workshops: step away, step away, step away. You're way too close emotionally to the work and to everything you just heard. Step away from it. So I step away from it and I let all those competing voices go through, and then I decide what to listen to and when to listen to myself, and then I go back into the draft. And often go back into the draft more after that, because sometimes the revisions that we make, we realize went against what we wanted to do, so we have to go back in again. But it's really those three writers that I trust and work with. Yes?
How quickly do your classes tend to, I don't know how many semesters you've been here, but how quickly do your classes tend to fill up?
There's a line outside my office door right now. Even though I'm not there, no. I don't know. I think you'd have to ask our great advisor. I mean, somebody told me after the Q&A that they're all filled for next semester and there's a waiting list. Yeah? Yeah. Yes? I was teaching on the road in it was a New American West class. We were looking at fiction, from the New American West, people who are writing the West right now. And I had not read Kerouac since I wrote my dissertation on the road when I was 20 and living like some kind of Kerouac. But when I was teaching that class, Indy was 5, and I read On the Road in a completely different way. Indy is my daughter, by the way. I guess I should have explained that. But, I think about that line from Salinger's Catcher in the Rye when Holden talks about going back to the museum. The museum pieces are always going to be the same, but something about you is going to be different. Something's going to have happened that morning to make you view those pieces differently. And I realized that I was viewing On the Road differently. I went back to my office after that class. I was teaching at Oklahoma State University at the time. And I pulled up the last syllabus in which I had taught On the Road, and it was an American Lit 2 class. And I thought, and we were working from an anthology, right? And I realized, and when a professor works from an anthology, the professor chooses what to pick from that anthology, right? And not just because of her own proclivities and patterns and heartbreak and everything, but I looked through the readings and I went, oh my God, is he really in everything that I taught that semester? Because this was in Boise, and it was pretty. Everything was still very, very raw, and so it first became a test. I took the texts, I took out all the syllabus, and I just started writing my own connection to them. I mean, I think anytime a professor teaches something well, it's because we have a personal connection with it. We have something to say about it and a way into it. Like we live inside that text in some way. But I wanted to speak to that. I wanted to speak to the way we're not just scholars and academics. We're human beings who somehow found these texts, and we want to share them and have something to say. So the syllabus essay is in part to speak to that as well. But that's how it came about. I mentioned this in the Q&A. I always challenge myself to write the essay that no one has written yet, and nobody had written a syllabus essay yet. One more question? Yes, Megan.
You said earlier that writing, honestly, is brave. I was just wondering if you've ever received any backlash from a job or an ex-job, if they ever read your work and were like, is that how you felt? because you do write so honestly?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think writing honestly, I think writing the essay is, I mean, I think writing is brave. It's a brave act. I remember watching Joy Arjo speak one time about just how brave it is to stand in front of that screen or that page. No, actually, I mean, a student from Boise State who read it wrote to me and said, "That's not how we remember you," but that's the point of the persona on the page. I mean, you know, Indy and I had great times in Boise. Me running the Greenbelt and her riding her little bike with training wheels behind me, and us going to the pizza shop every time and teaching her how to play pool. That was so awesome, you know. And I mean, teaching her the physics of pool was just so much fun when she was 4. But I've done the Erica Jong quote in class before, right? Conflict is the soul of literature. Yes, stamp it on your foreheads. So the essay is not about going back to the good places. It's about me diving as far down deep into the places where I couldn't really figure out what it was that I couldn't make work for us there. And it was the adjunct salary, it was the lack of state assistance, it was me trying to quit smoking, which I did. All she had to do was ask. It was, you know, and there was some other things too that didn't make their way into the essay. We talked about that too. Sometimes you have to leave things out that aren't a part of the work. So no, I've never had any backlash except for there's one essay in Loaded I wrote to honor a woman whose husband had left her after 20 years of marriage, and he had been in love with somebody else for 20 years, and he had waited for their child to grow and to leave the house before he told her, "Now I'm leaving." And I wrote this essay to honor her about, and I think there's a line about leaving as its own country. And I wrote it as a way, and how I wanted to go sit with her and hold her hand and not say anything, that we just understood each other. And I was about to send it off with an inscription to her and everything, and say, I admire you and the way you've carried yourself. And she had come across the book and read it and wrote me a very angry letter, and calling me really awful things. I'll always regret that, for her heart and for what I thought at the time was, I'm writing in a bubble. No one's ever gonna know this. People know this, and it changed the way I write about people. So I guess if there's backlash, I'm very careful about who I write about, and in particular, like I mentioned in the Q&A, I ask Indy a lot about, is this okay? Is this okay? And I think we should do that with everybody we write about. Is this okay? So. Thank you very much for coming. It's been an honor.